So, what are our plans for our new RV home base? Let's take a quick look. Welcome to RV Life in 3/4 Time, a vlog covering our adoption of the RV lifestyle. We are Cheryl and Carl Pearson, and here we're documenting the transition from our current lifestyle to our chosen adaptation of RV living, and hopefully passing along some useful information to others as we progress. Since in our last video we talked about the decision to move on to the next stage in our lives, which includes building a new RV home base, I thought we'd make a real quick video today giving an overview of the plans for that new RV home base and maybe dive in just a little bit into ways that we make plans for building that structure. As I said in the previous video, outside of the existing utility hookups on this property, one of the biggest draws for us was this long straight driveway, along with its twin driveway on the other border of the property. Once we saw this set up, it firmed up our plans for the RV home base. So here's the plan. We start with the property, a roughly 325 foot by 750 foot rectangle lying perpendicular to a straight paved road. As said before, we have driveways running down both borders of the property. There are a few trees, nothing obstructive, allowing us to place the RV home base towards the back of the property, somewhere along the center line, without having to remove any trees and only requiring a minimal amount of grading. We then plan to extend the driveway from over towards the property line to the RV home base near the center, and then back out the other side to the other driveway on the other property line. This will allow us to tow the fifth wheel off of the road, back up the straight driveway, and then over to the RV home base, where it can be parked in an inside space where it can be maintained and stored when we're not on the road. When ready to leave, we'll simply pull out the other side, over to the other driveway, back down and out onto the open road, all without ever having to back up the fifth wheel. When we built our current home, we were considerably younger, and it took us a while. We're not that young anymore, and frankly, we're in a hurry. We got the inspiration for the new RV home base from the people who erected our original RV cover for the fifth wheel, a company called Metal Pros out in Carrollton, Georgia. Metal Pros did a great job on our fifth wheel cover, and they were quick. When we found out that they did homes and barns in the past, we spent several planning sessions with Kyle over at Metal Pros, so we had a plan in our mind before we ever started looking for our property. Essentially, we planned to build a metal monitor barn, the high peak barn with sheds to the side, something like this, but with different utilization of the shed space and a different color scheme. Compared to that example, our plan calls for wider sheds on each side. The peaked center section will have garage doors on each end. There will be a small overhang on the shed towards the back of the property. The shed section towards the back of the property will contain parking for the go buggy and other vehicles. The shed on the side closest to the road will contain the living quarters. The dimensions of the living quarters will be 22 by 50, approximately 1,100 square feet. The dimensions of the peaked center section will be 16 by 50. Additional parking will be about 14 by 50. And the exterior overhang will be about 8 foot by 50 foot. As far as plans, we didn't need a detailed framing plan. Metal Pros could produce that if required, but we did need to lay out a floor plan so Metal Pros would know where we want the windows and doors, and to lay out the structure of the non-load bearing walls and utilities in the living area. I looked at several floor plan applications and I didn't like any of them. Either they cost more than I wanted to spend, their interfaces were too bothersome, or they simply wouldn't do what I wanted them to do. So I went back to my historical catch-all application, which I already had on hand, Microsoft Excel. I started by selecting all of the cells in a worksheet and set the height and width to 19 pixels square. Next, I selected a scale of 3 cells equals 1 foot, making one cell equal to 4 inches, the average width of your normal interior wall. That way, you can use the fill option to fill in a single row or column of cells, and you've created an approximation of a wall. Once I had the walls laid out, I used an empty fill and different border types to indicate windows and doors. Once I had that complete, I copied the contents of one worksheet tab and copied it into another tab in the same spreadsheet. I used the resulting copy to lay out approximate positions for lights and electrical outlets. I inserted line objects with arrowheads at both ends with text boxes to indicate dimensions for the project. When ready to print, I adjusted the print options to print everything on one page. I set the page margins to the smallest allowable by my print driver and then centered everything vertically on the page. While the output was a little small, it did provide enough information for my rough-in plumbing and slab contractors to be able to get their job done. We'll see how well it does for the rest of the project. So that's it, the overview of our plans for our new RV home base. The highlight of those plans being able to come in one drive, pull into covered RV parking, pull out the other side, go out the other drive without ever having to back up when towing the fifth wheel. It'll be a metal structure monitor barn with closed cell foam insulation, a barn-dominium if you will, with the high center section having parking for the fifth wheel, the shed section back away from the road having parking for the Class B plus Class C go buggy and other vehicles, and then the shed section closer to the road having reduced area living quarters. Not tiny home, but definitely downsized living quarters. Since it's a large RV parking area with living quarters tacked on one side, it's going to be built on a slab, which will give us probably some plumbing challenges since we're not used to building on slab at all, but I'm sure it's nothing that we can't find out a way to handle. So check back with us as the build progresses. Who knows? You may end up being amazed at the result. Have any of you bought or built a home designed around your RV lifestyle? If so, please comment below and share your take on the subject. In our next video, we break ground on the RV home base. Until then, get out there and enjoy the ride.